Alright, both players are loaded. Excellent. I'm going to wait to the game. There we go. Names are up, and here we go. We got in the bottom right corner for game 1 on ESV Ohana, the champion of Sandwich Muffin Gaming Fight Club for the Platinum League, the one, the only, SMGLukeG. Yes. And in the top right on ESV Ohana LE, as I mentioned only seconds ago, the Pink Terran, the challenger, SMGSlippery, who's only like 15 years old. How could his feeble childlike mind even comprehend the complexities of StarCraft? There's only one way to find out, and that is through the challenge of this show match. So, basically, all silliness aside, the winner of this best of 7 will become the SMG Platinum League Fight Club champion. The current champion, having beat SMG JTech weeks ago, is LukeG. It was a very exciting best of 7 that went all the way to the 7th game. Anyway, realistically speaking, Slippery has played a lot more StarCraft than Luke in recent weeks. Luke's got things like a job, a social life, all these things that are foreign and don't really make a lot of sense to a guy like me. SCV's crossing paths, both scouting at just about the same time. So, things are pretty even now. Both players walling in with barracks and supply depots at their ramps. Neither player has decided to grab an early gas, and just as I say that, Luke grabs an early gas. What could he be using this gas for? Only time will tell. What's going on here? Oh no. We gotta fight. Fight, 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 fight. That's going down. That SCV's going down. He dodges to the other side of the barracks. The pink SCV wraps around, and that is the end of that poor worker's life. Slippery's SCV survives with still almost 1/3 of his health remaining, and he's dealing damage to a second SCV. Luke has not pulled any workers, and wow. 2 workers die to the harass. Possibly a world record for worker harassment. I assume, based on my ability to see each player's, yep, I have this hack where I can see each player's particular vision, and I see that Slippery has scouted the first gas, and Luke seems to respond by grabbing a second gas, indicating potentially some early tech, which could also mean early pressure. Slippery, on the other hand, opts for the 1 Rax FE, and that's a little more on the standard side of things. So I assume Slippery is now expecting some early pressure from Luke as he grabs a tech lab, and we'll see in a second what that's all about. It's for a Reaper. Luke's going to do some very expensive scouting of his own. Meanwhile, mining heavily on the Vespine Geyser and throwing down a factory, which could be an early tank push, as we've seen so often. Slippery bunkers down, but a little bit further back from the top of his ramp, which means he's probably expecting some siege tanks to show up at some point. And now we have a second barracks going down, in addition to double gas. Wow. Didn't notice that. Wasn't expecting it. I guess that would explain the delayed barracks. Meanwhile, here's Luke. He doesn't have a full wall in. He's putting some supply depots back by his command center. Factory's still going down. And yeah, indeed. So both players just kind of building up to some sort of potential early engagement. Reaper on the way to see what he can figure out. Let's see how he does. He's moving up towards the cliff. Yep, there he goes, hopping up the cliff with his rocket pack. And he sees the natural. Now, Luke's played a lot of games versus me, and I'm not going to lie, I 1 Rax FE every time. Now, Slippery pulling some SCVs down to start working at the natural expansion, and Marines coming to respond to this Reaper. Luke's going to need some pretty good micro to prevent this from dying. And thankfully, the Reaper speed's just a little more than those Marines, and he's going to escape with his life, provided he can find a place on the cliff to escape. And the Reaper is very confused. Very, very confused as he traverses back through the base. I assume traverses is a word. And there's some Reaper harassment action as it engages the Marines and eventually dies. Alright, let's see what we've missed while focusing entirely on that Reaper and its actions. We got Luke. He has just started Stimpack quite late considering how early the tech lab went down. I guess that was more for the Reaper scout and not infantry so much, although I don't know how beneficial that actually was. I guess Luke probably scouted the 2 gas and figured there's going to be some kind of tech associated with that FE. Although he probably isn't so certain that that's actually as to how early those actually came. So we got 2 barracks, along with a factory and siege tanks coming out, and a starport going down. If we look at the worker count, 31 for Slippery, 23 for LukeG. So clearly that 1 Rax FE is paying off as opposed to Luke's 1 command center and only 1 command center. Fair enough. Luke seems to have gone for early tech and wants to actually use that defensively. Interesting. And yes, I should continue talking. Both players kind of just chilling out at the top of the ramps, playing defensively. In my opinion, Slippery's defensive tactics are a little better off, considering the worker count is now 37 to 25, so Slippery is quickly pulling ahead. 25 workers at 9 minutes is definitely not ideal, I ain't gonna lie. So Slippery on 4 gas now, so that's going to allow him to get any kind of upgrades. So he's researching stim. He's got siege mode and starting to bank. Well, no, he's managing his gas quite well. I'm eating my words here. We got Vikings coming out, which is going to give his tanks that extra little bit of vision that they'll need, as well as another tank. And now Slippery moving out for some early-ish aggression. Looks like a pretty 10-minute-ish push, considering that it's happening at 10 minutes. And I'm a little surprised to see this based on the fact that Luke's expansion was so late and his tech was so early. It seemed to indicate some kind of early aggression, whereas it actually didn't happen. So now Slippery picking up some bio units and a tank, and he might drop those on the high ground. In addition, yeah, he sends the medevac over, and he's going to drop on top of this tank by the look of it. Meanwhile, starting to siege and attack at Luke's natural. The tank on the high ground taking some damage, but at the same time, Luke's tank at the top of his natural is actually doing a great job of defending. Luke's just got to be sure to get rid of these Vikings, which are actually making his life hell. And still the siege tank on Luke's high ground from Slippery is really causing some trouble as well. I don't see how Luke can get good positioning unless he just rallies up some troops here. And he's got a good amount of Marines queued up, but actually they're has kind of terrible positioning considering this. And wow, this is doing a ton of damage. The tank on the high ground goes down. But Slippery with these air units can still get a little bit of vision and cause some problems. Now Luke's barracks is about to fall. It's really damaged, and there it goes. Could have been saved, but I guess under the pressure he didn't really notice that. So Slippery looks like he's sending some reinforcements down to Luke's base, so he's going to continue this pressure for quite some time. And meanwhile, looking at the worker count, we now have a 48 to 31 lead for Slippery, so his economy's pulling ahead quite quickly. Back at base, things are pretty quiet here. Slippery throwing down a couple more barracks and going for a 3rd expansion now at 12 minutes. Researching 1 weapon and armor upgrades and throwing down some supply depots. Luke's life is still made to be a living hell here as that Marine tank Viking harassment continues. Orbital commands at both bases, well, they seem to be making a minimal number of workers, and actually Luke is throwing down what appears to be a 3rd base, even though he's in really bad shape here. So it's hard to say how Luke's going to respond here. It's looking pretty terrible overall. Marines stimming in now, and they're going to try and take out this tank. Let's see if that happens. SCVs try to repair it, but to no avail. Now Luke's Viking goes down to these 4 Marines, and they're stimming around, causing all the chaos they can. That tank is just causing a world of hurt for Luke. And Luke really doesn't have what he needs to defend this, and I think this is probably just going to very slowly end the game. I would like to see Luke maybe pull SCVs and take out this tank, but at the same time, these tanks on the low ground, given the vision, can just deal with that. So it's looking pretty bleak for Luke. He's throwing down some panic barracks now. Marines still moving around, you know, stemming and shooting things. That seems to be a pretty good strategy. Shooting things is always a good idea in StarCraft 2. Meanwhile, Slippery back home is going for a third and continuing to pull ahead in economy. Luke's slowly catching up on worker production, though. Slippery seems to have let that slip a little bit with the amount of attention he's paying to this aggression. Luke's second still horribly undersaturated, and his main is horribly oversaturated. Probably a few more things to worry about than worker saturation at this point, but what he needs to do is just kind of keep calm and carry on here. He hasn't been able to do a lot in terms of responding to this aggression, and Slippery, I guess, feels like he's done enough damage, which I might have to agree with, and he's returning home on his 3 bases. Luke's on 3 bases now, but his worker count isn't quite there. Oh, well, things are evening out now, 53 to 46. So provided Luke can stay up on army count, which we'll check out right now. Okay, so Luke's army is, yeah, really small compared to Slippery's. But we'll see if Luke can use this time to catch up. Now, Slippery is really just going nuts on the macro, throwing down factories, so this could be some kind of mech transition. And a 4th command center now, so he's really looking to just dominate and take over the whole map. Considering the number of barracks, though, I think it might be more of a biomech composition with tank heavy. So, in the meantime, Luke's down here building very nice homes for his civilians. Defending, I heard some tank fire, so something must have happened there. Something indeed. So Luke's got double engineering bays, and he's sitting on 1-1 upgrades. Now the armory goes down, so he's jumping into, well, only 2-1 because he doesn't have enough gas to support that. There's actually only 1 worker mining gas here, and just throwing down his third and 4th gas right now. So yeah, he's not really going to be able to support those upgrades that he wants to, and at the moment he's not going to be able to produce tanks or medevacs. So meanwhile, Slippery is actually on 6 gas and probably going to continue with that, considering the number of advanced tech units he has. I guess tier 3 units at this point, potentially 2. I don't really know. Higher tech units, we'll say. So he's going to need a lot of gas for that, which he's already established. Meanwhile, Luke pushing out with a tiny force that is about to be crushed horribly by the forces of Slippery as soon as they see this. Slippery's got 2 sensor towers up, which I personally hate and find incredibly annoying. Now a 3rd sensor tower, and so he's taking tons of the map. Luke strategically moving between the and wow, he moves right into this sensor tower, so Slippery knows his army's there, and it's about to be cleaned up, if you ask me. Let's see how this actually goes. None of Slippery's tanks are sieged up, so they're not doing quite as much damage as they should. Now they're sieging up, and most of Luke's tanks, or Marines, are dead. And now he's just kind of stuck with 3 tanks there, and Slippery, as we can see, has a whole lot more. I ain't gonna lie. So yeah, Luke, back at home on 3 bases, got some unreactored barracks, some starports doing nothing, way more high-tech production structures than I think he can actually support. He really needs that 5th and 6th gas, and this is probably the most devastating push-out that could be imagined at this point in the game. And this will be interesting to see how Luke handles this, as I think his army size is quite a bit smaller than Slippery's. Yeah. So yep, if we look at the units, we have 28 Marines and 2 SCVs versus 28 Marines and 2 siege tanks versus 51 Marines, 14 siege tanks, along with 8 medevacs. So Slippery clearly has the advantage here, and unless he, just right-clicks into Luke's army and doesn't realize it, this is going to be GG, because there's absolutely nothing Luke can do. That's a lot of tanks at the bottom of the ramp. A whole lot. That is a ton of tanks, people. That is more tanks than you can shake a stick at. Meanwhile, Marines down at Luke's 3rd, just destroying that orbital. If they can't do that, they'll just destroy the workers. Meanwhile, tanks pushing in, and Luke's actually stimming into these tanks, and they're unsieged, and he's killing everything, but the Marines catch up, and this is gonna turn out to be a lot more even. Slippery still pulls ahead, even because he had such a dramatically huge advantage. But Luke did a lot more damage there than he should. However, Slippery still has double Luke's supply, and this is looking pretty bleak. Interesting. Very interesting. Well, Luke just didn't get absolutely crushed by that, and even though Slippery had a ridiculously huge army supply lead, Luke holds. Unexpected. That's all I can say. So, lots of idle workers. Luke has a lot of very lazy workers. Chilling, talking, drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes. Slippery, on the other hand, everyone's working. He's on 4 bases. There are lots of SCVs. Luke now moving 4 bases, but Slippery sees that with his Marine. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw this army, moving in the opposite direction and now switching it up, stimming over to Luke's end. Yeah, this little group of Marines isn't going to do a heck of a lot. Now I'm getting talked to on BattleNet. Phoned on my stupid cell phone at the same time, which I'm going to ignore. And Luke GG's.